autumn series. For those of you who are not aware, Water Skills Academy, basically what we do is we're a training organisation primarily, but we also run some expeditions, and we run some fantastic stand-up paddleboard trips to Scotland and Norway and Nepal, and some new venues coming online for 2021, as long as we can get there, which I'm hoping that we can. Some of you would have seen or have been following our webinars before. If you've missed any of these, they are on our Water Skills Academy website. Just click on the YouTube link and you'll be able to tune into those. Got some fantastic ones. One that we actually did with Cal earlier in this, I think it was around March, the last one that we did with you, Cal, maybe March or April.
It was quite early into lockdown, I think. It was
yeah.
When I was did into lockdown when we were all getting our heads around Zoom. I think it's one of the first times I actually went on Zoom.
Well, I'm still trying to get my head around Zoom, so I'm learning, but I think we're doing okay. So yeah, we covered Cal's fantastic adventure that she did from Land's End to John O'Groats, which is a great little webinar if you want to watch that one. I'm delighted to welcome Cal back, and welcome to everyone who's watching this. We're going to hear tonight about Cal's adventure, her most recent adventure along the River Severn, and what she encountered with the plastics and the fridge. I saw the film. I can't wait to ask you about the fridge. Also want to congratulate you, Cal, as well, because I think you quite recently just did the WSA Adventure course as well. So well done on that one. Brilliant.
And now an adventure sup guide.
Woohoo! So I think what we'll do, Cal, is there may be some people that might not have heard of you that are in our audience. So if you just want to give us a brief intro, really, as to your background, and then we'll lead into your latest adventure.
Sounds good. So I don't know who caught that earlier. Chris and I were chatting about whether I'm going to give a presentation. I'm not. So, but please throw your questions in the ring, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But yes, for those of you who I have never met before, lovely to meet you online. Wish we could have been doing this in person, but there we go, maybe next year. I am a vet by trade, so that's my profession. However, I consider myself, having spent many years in practice, I now have stepped out of clinical practice and consider myself to be trying to look after the animals in the ocean rather than the animals in my consult room. So I'm an environmental campaigner, particularly around the health of our oceans and rivers. And I have, for the last 5 or 6 years, been taking on stand-up paddleboarding expeditions as part of my Paddle Against Plastic campaign. And that's been all around raising awareness and talking to people about the positive solutions to plastic pollution. And that was the kind of premise behind the Land's End to John O'Groats expedition, which I did a couple of years ago in 2018. I spent a couple of months paddling from Land's End in Cornwall to John O'Groats in the north of Scotland. And I was all ready to be chatting away about plastics and all the things we can do to help alleviate the problem and all the ways that communities are getting on board to tackle plastic. And along the way realised that there was so much more to the message about plastic pollution than just talking about plastic. And for me, the most kind of profound thing I've learned through my campaigning and through that expedition is that actually to want to protect our ocean or nature in any regard, we need to feel a connection to it. So I feel very, very passionately about this concept of connection to nature driving us to want to protect it. And that's where I focus a lot of my energy now, on helping people to find their connection to the ocean for mental health benefits. And as a result of appreciating the mental health benefits of the ocean, wanting to protect it as a result. And I feel very, very passionately about protecting wild places. I'm sure it hasn't escaped your notice that we're in the middle of an ecological crisis. There's more and more in the media and in the news all around the collapse of biodiversity and climate change. And all of these ecological crises are completely interlinked, and we desperately need to be protecting wild places. That's our kind of first and foremost priority at the minute. Rather than actually destroying any more pristine environments and ecosystems, we need to be protecting them, and at the same time kind of working on the other solutions to climate change, plastic pollution, all that kind of thing. So I'm really waffling now because I could talk for an hour just about protecting wild places and just about the interlinkedness between all the different environmental crises. But that is where my passion is in protecting our ocean. And I paddled the River Severn, and I hope you've all had a chance to watch the film about that, because it gives a bit more indication as to why I was doing that. I was paddling it from the first navigable point, so as far up the river as I could, out to sea. And the premise behind that was demonstrating that, you know, in our small island nation, we're all connected to the sea, very, very literally through our canals and rivers. And that our actions inland can have a direct effect on the health of the ocean, which obviously then impacts back on our health. However, again, set out to talk about the plastics journey from source to sea, and within a couple of days found myself feeling very passionate about another element of rivers, and that is just the absolute beauty of the rivers that we have in this country. And I've never really been a particular river fan before. I can appreciate why people like them. I appreciate why people want to go really fast down them on very small kayaks and all that kind of thing, but I'd never really spent much time on a river. So for me, I was using this expedition simply to talk about our connection to the ocean. And within a couple of days, it became very clear to me that actually I was feeling very connected to this river as well, and seeing the destruction and devastation of the river very quickly took a hold on me. And the conversation became less just around how rivers are our connection to the ocean, and more about how rivers are an important ecosystem in their own right. So that's a little bit of background there, Chris, and everybody's listening. And I'm sorry, I feel like I could talk about all this stuff for hours and hours, but I want to make sure that we can have a conversation around this. Because what I was really struck by when I was paddling on the river is I didn't really know how to articulate how I was feeling about what I was finding, and I found it really difficult to get my head around this kind of feeling of grief that I had for the way that the river was being destroyed. And I presume we're all water users here, and it would be really great to kind of get your guys' feelings on how it feels to go down a river and find a dam or come across a lock or find plastic in a river, because for me it was heartbreaking, and I really wasn't expecting to be that touched by it. The only reason I think is because I'd spent 2 days on this beautiful pristine river, and then all of a sudden was finding it damaged, and it was heartbreaking. So
Well, thanks for that. I mean, I can't wait to get into a conversation with you about this, Cal, and hopefully our audience as well. So fire away some questions via the chat function. If you're new to Zoom, that's bottom of your screen. Just hit the chat, hit the keyboard, and I'll put the questions across to Cal. But Cal, first of all, you mentioned your film, and that you hope that a lot of us have seen it. I've seen it. It's fantastic. The cinematography is amazing in it as well. For our audience who may not know, how can they view that, your film?
Yeah, so the film, if you go to my website, which is calmajor.com, and then go to the River Severn page, or if you go to my Instagram, which is cal_major, and there's a link there in the bio to the blog I've written about the River Severn expedition, and there's a film link in there. So it's super easy to find, probably easiest via my Instagram link. It's only about, I think it's about 16 minutes, so it's not a particularly in-depth film. However, we wanted to keep the film super short so that we could get a message out there about plastics journey from source to sea. So because it's short, we haven't had the opportunity to really dive into this idea of how we can further protect rivers. So that's something that I'd like to touch on more today, and hopefully you guys have got some questions about that. And I'm not suggesting that I know all the answers here. There are people who are much better versed in this than I am. The Save Our Rivers guys, the Rivers Trust, they're fantastic advocates of protecting our rivers. But what I'd like to talk about today is how it felt as a water lover to go down that river and find it so affected by human activity.
Yeah, and Save Our Rivers is a thing that is close to our hearts here at Water Skills Academy. We're 1% for the Planet members, and one of the chosen charities is Save Our Rivers. So I guess, Cal, question, I'm going to kick this off to start with. Another great journey. How and why the River Severn? And maybe what's your standout moments? Let's start with the real positives on this one.
Yeah. So how and why the River Severn? It's been on my bucket list for a while. It's the UK's longest river, and I don't like to do things by half, so I thought I'd go for that one. But it also flows through some pretty major cities as it wends its way from the Welsh hills out to sea, out to the Bristol Channel. And I spent a day or two on the River Severn on the lower stretches before, when I was paddling from Land's End to Groats, but never really explored further up. And I just had this feeling that that's the river I needed to paddle. I also want to paddle a couple of other rivers in Scotland as well, but the River Severn for me, it was just, yeah, I don't know, it just had this kind of, this pull to me. I just really wanted to go and experience what it was like to be on that river. And I think specifically with the message that I was delivering, which was around plastic's journey from inland to sea, I wanted to demonstrate how that changed through these cities, and it flowed through 3 pretty big cities there. So
maybe Cal, sorry to interrupt you. We've got a truly international audience. Welcome, Kristen from California. She's listening in. Big fan of yours. For people who maybe are not aware of the exact location or the start point of the River Severn, I must admit I wasn't until I watched your film and realised, wow, that's quite a long river, eh? And how it varies. So where's the actual source? Where's the start?
So the source is in a place called Plynlimmon, which is up in the Welsh Hills. So not a million miles from Aberystwyth, up in the Welsh Hills. It actually starts about 15 miles inland from the West Welsh coast. And from there it goes through the hills, through the Welsh Hills, out towards, through Powys to Shropshire, and then to the cities of Worcester, through Shrewsbury, and then to Worcester, Gloucester, and then out through the Bristol Channel towards, and the Bristol Channel is obviously a great big massive estuary that goes out to sea. And it's about 350 kilometres long, so it's the longest river in the UK, and only just the longest river in the UK. But the navigable section, so that bit that flows from the Welsh Hills to Powys, it's really, really narrow. It's very rapidy. A lot of it's waterfalls, big boulders. It starts as a tiny trickle and then kind of, merges into this slightly bigger river, but it's definitely not navigable on a SUP. And so the first real place you can get onto it on a SUP reliably is at the Welsh-English border. And that's where I started the journey on the river, is at the Welsh-English border, where I could get my fin in without bashing it every 5 minutes.
And how many days were you actually paddling then, Cal?
How many days?
Yeah,
so it's about a 7-day paddle, and I paddled about 260 or 270 kilometres. That was kind of the stretch from the Welsh border out to sea. Yes, it took about a week.
Yeah. And watching your film, how diverse that river is and how it changes. Hey, it was, the lower reaches of it were, for those of you, I don't want to spoil it really for the people that haven't seen the film yet, but the fridge, which we'll come on to the fridge at the end. I am very, very interested to see how a young lady gets a fridge onto a paddleboard and then gets rid of it. So we'll come on to that one. But so standout moments then, Cal. If you had to list, I don't know, maybe three off the top of your head, standout moments of your journey, positive ones.
I think the most memorable was the first kingfisher I saw. Never seen a kingfisher before, and I thought they were this ridiculously elusive bird that you only see if you're a wildlife cameraman and you sit still with a long lens for 6 hours. And the first day I was paddling down this river, I was not expecting to see it at all. I just saw this blue flash just dart across in front of my face, and I was like, that's a bloody kingfisher, that's a bloody kingfisher. And then that that day I think I saw something like 10 kingfishers in one day, and I was absolutely blown away by it. And I got really in tune to their little squeak. They have a little kind of call that they make just before they fly.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'd hear that, I'm like, there's going to be another kingfisher. And it was so special. And the first couple of days of paddling, I got on the river and the weather was beautiful, which really helped. So it was beautiful and sunny. But for about 3 days, I didn't paddle through any towns. It was just beautiful river. And there was a bit of agriculture, that it wasn't completely untouched by humans. There was farmland that I was going through, and a few fishermen and that kind of thing. But I wasn't going through any cities, and so it felt really wild. There were sections where there were massive, great big lines of trees on the side of the river, and just so many birds, and it felt really, really wild. And there were a few bits where I was on my board, and I couldn't see any sign of human activity, and I honestly felt like, God, I felt like a kid or something. I felt like I was on a wildlife documentary paddling down the Amazon or something. It was so special, and I really hadn't expected that from the UK's longest river, which serves these massive cities downstream. I hadn't expected to be so immersed in the kind of wild side of it.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I know at some point this evening we will talk about the mental health benefits of being on the river and how good it is for us. But it sounds like you were immersed truly in a really rural setting there, and I know you hit the other towns and things changed, but wow, it is so good for us, isn't it, when we're in a setting like that. I have rivers like that around here where they flow out into an estuary, but the upper reaches of them are very similar to what you're describing. And it is just amazing when you early morning paddle or whatever time, and you're the only person around, it feels like, and it's so good for our mental health.
So special. And I think, we spend so much of our time in our society which is indoors, or it's in towns and cities, and I'm an environmental campaigner, and I didn't realise that, like, just on our doorstep, like literally a day's paddle north of Shrewsbury was just stretches of beautiful, like almost wilderness. And we can't call it wilderness. It does have it has been impacted by humans, but I was so surprised. And I think I've heard people going on about how wonderful rivers are and how much they love spending time there, but even as an environmental campaigner, until I actually spent those 3 days paddling on the river, I must admit to not having felt my own personal connection to it. And it's only after I had that I was like, my God, rivers are awesome. We need, I knew from the kind of scientific reasons why we should protect rivers, but it's only after spending those 3 days on it that I was like, this is ridiculous that we're canalising them and damming them and all this kind of thing downstream. Like, really, really affected me. And I think that was so wonderful to feel, and really surprising for me.
Yeah. And I think if any of the audience are just purely ocean paddlers, I mean, that's my background, but getting on the river, like you say, it is completely different territory, and it's opened my eyes to a fantastic way of paddling as well. So I encourage anyone who's not done it to get on the river. Be safe. Let's not jump straight into grade 3s, but there's some fantastic rivers that we have here in the UK, and a lot of sub clubs along the way as well that you can join in, and which I know you hooked up with 4 guys that helped you out. We'll talk about that a little bit later on.
That would be really good. And another thing, just really quickly about the river, comparing it to ocean paddling. One of the things I love about ocean paddling is the energy you can get from the ocean. There's always waves, there's wind, there's always something going on, some kind of movement with the tide, and I love that. I love how raw and energetic it feels. And having spent quite a bit of time paddling on canals, I don't get that on canals. Like, canals have their own special thing going on. But having come from that ocean environment, I knew I loved that energy. Being on the river, which was flowing, that flowing section, the little ripply bits, it was just wonderful. Like, being able to really feel the kind of movement of the water. It sounds a bit fluffy, isn't it? But it's so kind of affirming to be in that, like, raw nature. It was lovely.
Did you camp overnight or stay in your van? Sarah's asking that one. So evening, Sarah. On your journey, because you said, I think, how many days did you say you paddled for?
7 days.
7 days, yes, sorry. And so were you camping when you got off the river, or were you staying in your van, or did you have accommodation sorted? What happened on that one?
Hi, Sarah. Yeah, so I love camping. For me, camping is a big part of my own adventures that I do. I really, really enjoy it. This one, so the film that was made, my boyfriend's a filmmaker, so he was there with me the whole time. He wasn't on the water, but he was in the area. So he basically had my camper van, and he'd meet me every night in my van. And it's amazing how many places we found along the river that we could stop at, little campsites or pubs that let camper vans stay in their car park. And that was, yeah, that was, it made it a little bit easier because I was picking up a lot of stuff off the river, so I needed my board space to put all the stuff that I was picking up on the board. So I don't think I'd have had much room for camping gear.
No.
And also there were days, one day I stopped in the centre of Worcester. I wouldn't have wanted to camp there. It was really handy to have him for this trip. And that's something I found with a lot of these kind of campaigning trips that I run, is that there is a bit of a difference between just having a wild old adventure and doing something where you need to be filmed and you need to be kind of creating a message and charging your phones that you can go on Twitter and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yes, so a lot of planning involved. We obviously talked about we had the webinar with your fantastic trip from Cornwall to John O'Groats, and an amazing amount of planning that was involved in that, and I'm sure a fair bit of planning that's gone into your River Severn journey as well. And I've just got to big up your boyfriend for his filming quality. It's amazing. So go and watch that film, guys, if you haven't seen it. And the drone footage, I'm assuming it's drone, unless he's in a hot air balloon, but it's really good. So the kingfishers, that was one of the standout moments, and beautiful to see them, isn't it, on our rivers? Got another one, Karen, maybe? We're on the spot now.
Oh, other standout moments. I mean, I've talked about the amazing big trees. To be honest, I think it was just the first few days really kind of. Okay, I've got two more standout moments. One of them was there's one evening when I just noticed, like, I'm a really busy person, and I don't just mean busy in terms of got loads to do. I'm quite like a busy person. And I find it really hard just to kind of stop and chill out. I remember one evening, the sun was going down, it was a beautiful evening. I just was paddling past these trees, and the wind was rustling through the leaves. And I just stopped and watched it and was like, that is so beautiful. I just remember thinking, I wasn't thinking anything else. It was just me and the trees. And that's the definition of mindfulness, isn't it?
Yep.
And a couple of days on the river, and I was managing to achieve those little moments of mindfulness. And for me, that is one of the beauties about really going on an expedition or going on an adventure, and just being out there on the water. You have to be so focused on what you're doing, and it's so easy to really tune into what's going on in nature around you. And that was such a beautiful moment.
Well,
then,
sorry.
No, go on. I was going to say the third standout moment for me, and I think, to be honest, this was maybe on par with the Kingfisher. Was a day I had the guys from Chalmarsh Sup Group join. We had four guys join, and it was just so lovely to share that experience with them. I'm very used to doing things on my own, and it does get lonely. And I really, really love being on. I love being on my own. I really enjoy that kind of ability to be mindful in my environment and just zone into it. But it's so nice to be able to share that experience with somebody. And these four guys, they were just completely in tune with everything I felt about it. They were so passionate about that river as well. We had a laugh. They about cleaning it up, and it was just a real joy to have to have a day with them. It was awesome. I saw that on the film. What was the name of their club again that they were? Chalmarsh Sup Club. So we had two Duncans, Craig and Dave, and it was just it was awesome. From the minute I met them, I was like, all right, this is going to be a fun day, and it was ace. So if anyone's around that kind of area, the Shropshire area, Chalmarsh Sup Club, and they've basically introduced loads of people to paddleboarding, and they've just set up a Shropshire Plastic Patrol Club, regular paddle, picking up plastic and stuff. So yeah, you know, like I say, I'm quite alone a lot of the time when I do these expeditions. So to have a crew was really special, and I can see how powerful that could be for a lot of people to have that that crew and that camaraderie and the like-minded people in the water with them.
Yeah, it's brilliant to share that, isn't it? And it's inspired those guys to get out there, and I think they were doing it already anyway, but to encourage their club members now to be doing litter picks, and so fantastic. So, okay, 3 fantastic positives. I guess we need to start talking about the maybe not such good positives, the negatives. So straight to the worst offenders, really. And Craig from Shropshire is asking, what would you say was the most collected item along the river, and how do you see the producers taking responsibility?
Yeah, I'm just. How do I get the chat thing up?
Bottom of your screen. There's quite a thread going on at the minute.
So Craig is actually one of the guys who came on the water with us today. Hi, Craig. He says sorry for eating James's flapjacks. I think James bought flapjacks for us all one day. I'm pretty sure that they were for all of us. He'd have been horrified if I ate them all myself. So the question is, what would you say was the most collected item along the river, and how do you see the producers taking responsibility? Now, I think the most collected item was probably different to the most polluting item. The most collected item was plastic bottles, and that's possibly only because that's what floats. You know, we've got loads of different plastic items that go into the river. A lot of them will end up out to sea, a lot of them will sink. We won't actually be able to see them or pick them up. Plastic bottles, they float, they're really easy to see, really easy to pick up, and they get stuck in the trees around the edge of the river, so they're quite a common offender. And I would say that a good proportion of them, probably this is just anecdotal, but probably about 50% of what I was picking up were plastic water bottles, which is one of my real bugbears because they're so unnecessary in our society. You know, in the UK, where we have tap water that we can drink, and you know, we can refill our bottles from almost anywhere, it's a real shame to still be seeing so many polluting the river. How can producers take responsibility? Well, at the moment, you know, over the last few years, there's been a campaign for a deposit return scheme. So that's basically a reverse vending machine that the producers need to get on board with, whereby we can actually take plastic bottles back to a shop and get you 20p back from recycling them, which is a step in the right direction, and it has been approved by the government, but it just needs that last kind of like bit of dedication from Parliament to actually push it through. And that's a great step because it means we're going to increase recycling rates and hopefully avoid things that I was seeing, like all those plastic bottles on the river. However, it's not the only answer. You know, we've really got to be looking at how we can reduce the amount of plastic that we're using altogether. Recycling is a fantastic step, and for plastic bottles, a lot of them are PET, which is really readily recyclable. You put them in your recycling, they have a value and they can be recycled. However, plastic is not infinitely recycled, and it loses its value every time it is recycled, and it takes a lot of energy. And actually, where that's avoidable, it seems ridiculous to be having to use it. Where can producers take responsibility? I think the first thing is admitting to how damaging they are. There's so much back chat from plastic producers, particularly big companies like Coca-Cola. You know, I saw a water bottle from Buxton Water, I think it was, saying, oh, that, you know, this water bottle is made from other plastic water bottles, and I tweeted them saying it's not the point, it's still found its way into our river, it makes no difference, it's still in our river en route to the ocean. And their response was, oh, you know, we're creating these compostable bottles and which will compost in the ocean, which is a load of tosh. Like, it's just, you know, we don't have materials at the moment that are readily available that are going to compost in the ocean. So I think the first thing is to stop hiding behind this kind of greenwashing screen of suggesting that that they can still go about business as usual and not harm the planet. The hard truth is the companies producing plastic, particularly things like plastic water bottles, they are making enormous profits from polluting our environment, damaging the health of the ocean, damaging the health of the river, the animals there, and damaging our health. I think the first thing they need to do is actually own up to that. And maybe once they do that, we can kind of start to look at other ways. But, you know, it's unfortunately, the plastic industry is a huge industry. It's basically intertwined with the oil industry because plastic's made from oil. And so it's, yeah, it's a really, really challenging one. And we see a lot about, you know, is this the fault or the responsibility of the government? Is it the businesses? Is it the consumers? I think it's all of us actually. And until we have the public pressure to really kind of push for a deposit return scheme in Parliament, that wasn't even a conversation. And it's only now we've got the public pressure of people pushing for companies to do things different that they're actually having to stand up to our kind of our questioning. So so I think, you know, we have to keep making these producers you know, take responsibility for it. It's really, really hard, but the more people we have refusing to use single use where they can, and actually, you know, calling out these big businesses, the more incentive they have to do things properly, and not just, you know, do a tick in their CSR box or a tick in their greenwashing box. Yeah. It's really hard, you know, it's really hard. But I think, you know, this isn't just down to the individual, but we all still have a voice that we can use to really keep these, you know, keep banging the drum, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware, to be honest, about the deposit return scheme. How far down the line is that then? What an amazing initiative. I remember as a kid, I'm showing my age now to the audience, because if you remember this, you'll work out how old I am. But we used to have the glass bottle return scheme, and on a Sunday night, us and a few others would go around raiding as many glass bottles as we could, and we'd take them back to the store and come out with a few pence in our pockets. And it was good fun, actually. I won't say what we bought with them at the time, but how far down the line are we then with this plastic deposit return?
Yeah, so Surfers Against Sewage were really instrumental in that. They did a lot of work with that, and actually got approved through a lot of their kind of campaigning with their all-party parliamentary group. It got approved early 2018, I want to say. I think I remember I was in Jordan at the time and getting a notification. It's like, oh, this is amazing. Okay, now I'm back I was in the middle of a desert, so I couldn't really do anything about it. But I think it was early 2018. And like with anything, it just takes a long time for anything to happen. And I think one of the issues with it is that they were trying to kind of do the minimum. You know, they were trying to make it just for small just for small plastic bottles rather than for big ones as well. And it's kind of, I think it's creating all the infrastructure and all the stuff that goes with it. So I don't know where we're at the minute. I know it's been approved, but I don't know what the current situation on that one is. It seems to have kind of fallen a bit by the wayside at the minute. I've not heard any updates on it recently. But
well, I mean, that would make a massive difference, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, it incentivizes people to, you know, it incentivizes recycling. And like you say, you know, you'll find kids who want a bit of pocket money for going. So I remember I was in Barbados a few years ago, and there was not a single plastic bottle on a beach there, and that is because they had a bottle deposit return scheme. And there were guys who their entire livelihood was picking up bottles off the beaches and the streets and going and getting their money back for them. It was brilliant.
I mean, I was very fortunate to spend some time in Indonesia and Bali. I've been there a few times, and on the most recent trip, I was absolutely shocked to see the amount of plastic on the beach in one particular area, which I won't name, but if they had an incentive like that there, I mean, it would be incredible, really. So, well, fingers crossed. Let's hope that rolls. So you mentioned plastic bottles. What, you know, I've seen your film. Again, I don't want to give away everything, but what else did you come across there?
I think one of the other things, the other main things, stuff that have been flushed down the loo. So especially in the trees. So often what happens is you get a big storm, you get loads of rain, and the sewers empty into the rivers, and the water levels rise, and all this stuff goes racing down the river, and you've got trees with branches on the outside of the river, and everything gets caught in the trees, and then the water levels drop and it stays there. So I'd be paddling past trees which were just like basically just baby wipe trees, so baby wipes that people had flushed down the loo that were caught in these tree branches, and panty liners, sanitary towels, all sorts of really gross kind of toilet stuff that was just stuck in the trees. And I know there's been a lot of press on this as well in the last few years, which is fantastic, about the need to not flush anything down the loo that isn't pee, paper or poo, basically. And it's really important because it's, I didn't realise, but you know, people flush cotton buds down the loo, and all sorts, tampon applicators, plastic things, like all sorts of stuff gets flushed down the loo, and our sewage systems can't cope with it. So it not only can upset the sewage systems and cause overflows when there's blockages, but you know, if there is if the sewage systems are let to overflow, then it can go into the rivers, and we find loads of it on beaches as well. Baby wipes contain plastic; they're not biodegradable, so it's really important not to flush anything down the loo, so that paddleboarders like me don't have to be pulling baby wipes and sanitary towels out of trees. Please.
Yeah. Talking about pulling that kind of stuff out of the river, just from a hygiene point of view, how do you protect yourself then, Cal? How do you do this, and you know what precautions do you take?
Yeah, I'm quite careful actually, because I don't want to get sick, obviously. So I have a pair of gloves. I had a massive thing of hand sanitizer on the board with me, and I was really careful with my hygiene when I was eating, because I eat constantly when I'm on the board. I'm quite used to kind of, because I'm a vet, I'm used to kind of infection management and stuff, and knowing what you have and haven't touched and that kind of thing. So I'm really conscious of that. But that's a really good point actually, Chris. Like, it's really important, if you are picking up litter, your safety has to come first, especially at the moment with COVID stuff. You know, if you're finding face masks and that kind of thing, your safety has to come first. So there were things, there was one day I didn't have a pair of gloves with me, and I was happy picking up plastic bottles, but I was not picking up baby wipes off trees that day. When I then got my gloves from the van, I'd left them in the van, or I had like a grabber, I was much happier to do that. But yeah, you just have to be really discerning. And again, there are some things that I find in the water. I found this massive bin bag. It was basically somebody's weekly bin bag thing, and I started picking that up, and there was just all sorts of rancid stuff in it, and again, I had a pair of gloves with me, and that unfortunately had to stay in the river, because you have to put your own health first sometimes.
So what when you're paddling then, Cal, you're obviously, the board you're using is I think it's a starboard that I've seen that you're using, so pretty stable board. I'm sure you've chosen a nice stable board. So you're collecting your stuff in, well, how do you collect it? What do you put it in?
So the first few days in the river, I was using a starboard inflatable board, and the reason for that is the inflatable is a little bit, I'm less worried about bashing the nose of my inflatable into the side of a river to be pulling things out of the trees and that kind of thing. And it's easier to, you know, I didn't know what portages I might need. I didn't know whether there'd be really shallow bits that I had to pick my board up and carry it over. Fortunately, they weren't. But I just wanted the versatility of having an inflatable on the first few sections of the river. Yeah. And on that board, I have a big bucket on the front, basically, and everything goes in there. Any big bits, they just sit on the front under the bungees or on top of the bungees. And the board's really, like you say, it's really stable, so things aren't falling off the board. I'm not falling in, no capsizing or anything like that. I use a 12'6" board, so it's got a really nice glide, but it's also got enough kind of volume that I can pilot high with stuff that I'm finding. And having a bucket on the front is really useful. I sometimes have like a net bag as well, so that I can put the contents of the bucket into the net bag, tie that off, put it under a bungee, and then carry on filling up the bucket.
Yeah, so we've seen an increase in COVID litter with the disposable face masks. Did you come across any of that on your journey?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, and gloves, and plastic gloves, yeah, quite a lot of that. Which it's just a sign of our time, isn't it? It's everywhere, yeah, unfortunately. But again, you know, like I coming back to hygiene, I was only picking that up with my grabber or with a pair of gloves on, because yeah, it's pretty scary stuff, really.
So apart from this famous fridge, what course, I mean, again, how much on average were you picking up per day? Then would you say?
So my bucket was getting full within, I don't know, an hour, couple of hours every day.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff, really a lot of stuff. The first few days, a lot of it was actually sheeting, agricultural sheeting. So big hay bales, silage bales, you see them wrapped in plastic. A lot of that stuff in the trees the first few days. When I wasn't going through towns and cities, it was stuff that was coming off the land. So yeah, some feed buckets and stuff like that from farming. I found a cow in the river at one point in time, thought I was going to have to rescue it, but it managed to get out of the river. But that's how closely linked the farmland is to the river in a lot of places. Oh, just having from Craig, don't forget the inflatable boat. Yes, I found an inflatable boat at one point in time. Just all sorts of stuff. And once I got to the cities, I was finding more single-use stuff, so more crisp bags, plastic bottles, stuff that had been flushed down the loo, and kind of the more rural sections, it was more farming waste and stuff like that.
So different kind of waste then really to your ocean journey that you completed. But some obviously would have been similar, but if you'd have found farming stuff halfway out in the ocean, it would have been quite surprising really. But who knows, this stuff travels a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and that's one of the surprising things. I think for a lot of people, when they do their first beach clean, they're really shocked to see stuff that they've been using, in their everyday life, or stuff that's come across the water from, I don't know, Korea or China or somewhere really far away, to find that on our shores. Our ocean, it has massive currents that connect us all around the world. Similarly with our rivers are flowing out to sea. We don't have these defined areas where if we drop our litter, we can collect it again. Once it's in the environment, it can go anywhere basically.
Yeah, we had a buoy wash up a couple of years ago, and we traced it back to Nova Scotia. Just a classic example, isn't it, of how far this stuff can travel. And what do you do with the rubbish when you collect it then? And Sarah's asking, did you log it in? Do you record?
So I weighed what I had, and I kind of noted down what I was finding and tried to. So one of Surfers Against Sewage's campaigns is the Return to Offender campaign. In previous years, that's been actually picking stuff up and posting it back to the people, to the producers who've made it. This year, they're doing it more on social media, so you can snap you can take a picture of what you found, and then tweet or tag them on Instagram and say, what are you doing about this? You're polluting our environment. What are you doing about this? And that's a great way to keep the producers accountable. That's what I did with that Buxton water bottle, which said it was made from other water bottles, and it was still in the river. And so I was taking pictures and tagging them on Twitter and that kind of thing, trying to get a little bit of kind of accountability for the main producers that were there. Again, SAS in their upcoming Beach Clean series, they've got like a brand audit, so you can actually log what brands are being found so they can be kept accountable. There are a couple of apps that log litter. There's the Plastic Patrol app. That one you can actually log what you find. But yeah, I was mostly just weighing it and sort of writing down what I was finding. I spoke to Keep Britain Tidy before I took on the trip and asked them about how I could recycle this waste. And unfortunately, because it's river waste, a lot of it is so contaminated that it's not recyclable, which is really unfortunate. A lot of beach waste we get can be recycled. A lot of people want it for art projects and that kind of thing. Yeah. Unfortunately, this stuff, it just couldn't. So most of it had to go to landfill, which is horrible to have to do because you almost kind of want to close the loop a little bit better. But yeah, most of it had to go to landfill, unfortunately.
Well, there's still a positive, isn't there, coming out of it? You're taking this debris out of the river, out of the natural environment. So yeah, unfortunately, there is a bit of a trade-off there. But without you taking it, without us or you and each individual taking stuff out of the river, it would remain there and
also, I mean, the kind of, I was looking at the bigger picture, really trying to demonstrate how our lives in land can affect the ocean, but also obviously the natural environment around us. You know, it's not a case of litter in the ocean is thrown overboard off a ship. A lot of it comes from rivers, and I've got this real passion for connecting more people to the ocean, helping everybody understand how these waterways, or rivers, and our ocean connect us all, and we're all a part of that, and we can all be a part of the conversation about protecting them. And we can start that by acknowledging that our actions, you know, our plastic consumption, if our plastic goes into the environment, goes into the river, goes into the ocean, you know, it's not just the kind of coastal dwellers that can be a part of changing the plastic pollution situation.
Claire's asking, do you have a link for the Plastic Patrol app? Is it Planet Patrol? She's asking.
No, I think if you just Google it, you should be able to find it. I don't have a link, I'm afraid.
Okay. So Craig's reminded you about the inflatable boat. We've heard about the other stuff that you found.
Yeah,
let's get on to this fridge. Okay, I'm fascinated about the fridge. I want to know how you found it. What did you do with it? How did you get it out of the? How did you ever get that onto your board? If you did get it onto your board, I'm not. Tell us. I'm intrigued.
So it was the last day on the river. It was the tidal section of the River Severn, so it was super fast flowing. I was absolutely loving being back on this really fast flowing section. I've been through a really kind of stifled section of river, and I was back on the tidal section of the river. It was so wonderful, and I paddled past this enormous chest freezer, like massive freezer. And I took one look at it and was like, there's nothing I can do about that. So put a shout out on Twitter, see if anybody could come and help with it. I was pootling along, merrily pootling along, and then saw something else in the river, and it looked just like a little square block of plastic or something. I was like, I wonder what that is. I'll go and get that out. My bucket was already full of plastic bottles and everything. And I picked it up, I started to pick it up, I was like, oh God, this is really heavy. And fortunately that day I was on my hardboard. So once I got back onto the estuary, I went back on it over to my hardboard, because I just love the way it paddles. I have so much more fun on my hardboard. But anyway, I pulled this thing out, and as I was pulling it out, I was like, oh no, I've gone too far now. And I pulled it out and just dumped it onto the back of my board. And it was this, like, not a massive freezer, but an under the counter freezer. So like
the half size one. So
exactly.
You definitely had your 3 shredded wheat that morning.
Exactly. Well, the thing was, now on my board, like, oh bloody hell, what, like, that's it now. That's on my board now. I can't, like, and then I knew that the only place I was going to come out was 20 miles down the river. Like, I didn't have anywhere else that I could come out. And I started paddling, and I could already feel that I was so sluggish, because on the back of my board was this, must have been about 20 kilo freezer just plonked there. And I didn't want to really move it either, because it was so sharp and degraded that I thought it was going to scratch my board up, and I was like, oh, this is a nightmare. And then I also found this massive kind of feed tub, so I had another 10 kilo feed tub on top of it. So I had about 40 kilos of litter just on my board. And I was so slow that day, and the river was flowing really fast, but I knew I had to paddle super fast to get to Sharpness before the water had gone out so far that I was just in mud. I didn't make it. I got to Sharpness, and there was about, I don't know, 100 meters of mud that I had to wade through. And I got there, and there's so many times on that journey I was like, this bloody freezer, and I was so tempted to push it back in the river. I was like, I can't do it, I'm not going to do it. Oh, but if I could just push it, but no, I'm not letting go of this freezer, I've got it now. And then got to Sharpness, and it was just mud. It's like, I can just about probably crawl myself out of this, let alone a freezer. Unfortunately, I was met at Sharpness by the Severn Area Rescue Association, which are a really amazing, they act like a kind of like a voluntary coast guard basically, and they're absolutely brilliant. They had a crane on the side of the thing, so they basically helped me haul this thing onto the crane, and they craned it up and out of the water for me, and then kind of helped me crawl through the mud, and then hosed me down. So it was a very interesting day. It was a bit different to how I expected the last day of the trip to be, definitely.
Yeah, it's got to be the heaviest thing that you've picked up,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, well, amazing balance.
Well, I wasn't, if I'd have known that that was an under-the-counter freezer, would I have thought that it was a good idea to pick it up and put it on my board? Possibly not. But actually, having done that, even though it slowed me down, whatever, it doesn't matter. I got muddy. It doesn't matter at all. I made it back safely. My biggest worry was getting back to Sharpness in safety, because obviously the mud can be quite treacherous. But having done it, I'm so glad I did, because otherwise that freezer, that would have been polluting the river. It would have gone out to sea, or it would have injured an animal. Like, I'm so glad I managed to get that out of the water. But it's just such a shame that in one day I found 2 freezers. Like, who's throwing their freezer in the river these days? There's no excuse for it.
Yeah, shopping trolleys, normally we see them, but
Yeah,
a
yeah.
fridge, I mean, it must have been an amazing sight for any spectators that were on the riverbank seeing this young lady paddling along with a fridge on the back of a board. It reminds me of the book I read when I was in New Zealand. It's called Around Ireland with a Fridge. I can't remember, it's Tony somebody. If you want a good book to read, audience, have a look at that one. And it's a bet that someone bet this guy that he could not hitchhike around Ireland with a fridge, and he took it on. And the stories that he tells. Anyway, I'm digressing, but it's a good book. But well done to you.
Well, James put the drone up at one point in time, so I never know where James is going to be. The only way I know where James is because I hear the buzz of a drone up ahead, and like, oh, James is somewhere around. I'm like, hello. Anyway, I heard the drone, and then about 2 minutes later, I got he was calling like, "What have you got on your board? What is going on?"
Amazing you got the balance to look up with the fridge of that weight.
Yeah, so. I had to kneel down the whole day.
Yeah, well done, stern effort, that one. I want to touch briefly, Cal, on the mental health aspect. And Sarah's asked a question quite early on in the chat. Sarah's asking, how do you deal with the mental health issues that affect you when you try to deal with a bigger picture of plastic pollution? It must be pretty hard some days when you see the amount of plastic that you're faced with, and you must have down days. Basically, I guess the question is, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the plastic side of things, I'm so used to seeing that now. I'm so used to campaigning around it that I don't get as worked up by it now as I used to. Mm-hmm. I've seen beaches in the middle of Scotland, like remote beaches, just covered in plastic, wildlife and plastic, and horrible to see, but I'm so used to seeing it now. That doesn't make it okay. But with the plastic side of things, especially going down the river, like I was so ready to see all the plastic I saw. I just knew it was going to be there.
Yeah.
So with the plastic, that I think I'm used to it. And also we're starting to see successes now with plastic. The deposit return scheme announcement a couple of years ago was fantastic. Just before I went on the river, or was it after I went on the river? At some point in time recently, we've had an announcement about them banning plastic straws, cotton buds, and plastic stirrers, which is fantastic. We are seeing successes. It's too slow, but we are starting to see successes, and so many people on board with this message now. And that's what keeps me going with the plastic pollution crisis. We have so many voices talking about this, and so many communities and organisations tackling this, and individuals who get it. And I think it's a really easy thing to get if you can put someone in that situation where they can see the plastic, touch it, feel it, and really kind of get their head around how their actions can affect the natural world as well, and how they can therefore protect it. It's really easy to get that message across. One thing I did find very kind of heartbreaking on this one, and this, like I was saying earlier, I've never spent much time on rivers before this, and so I wasn't expecting to be so personally connected to it as I was with this. And for 3 days I'd paddled down this beautiful river. I talked about the trees, I've spoken about the kingfishers, how mindful I felt, how just alive and raw and real everything felt. And then I came to Shrewsbury, first town in the trip. Nothing against Shrewsbury, like lovely town, but instantly it felt so different, like massive concrete walls at the side of the river. And for the next 3 days I was basically paddling through Shrewsbury, Worcester, Gloucester. Nothing against these towns, they're beautiful towns and cities to paddle through. You get cathedrals, but for me that's not where I want to spend time on a river. I don't want to be in a city. And I think what really struck me was that I was no longer seeing kingfisher. I was no longer surrounded by these beautiful massive trees. I was surrounded by concrete and boats.
Yeah.
And the first one of the first days there, I think it was the first lock I came across, and it was this massive concrete structure on this, you know, previously such a wild place. And that night I came off the river, and I think as well there'd been a lot of boat traffic that day. And this is the thing that I find really hard to talk about, because I don't want to shame anybody for spending time on a boat on a river. Like that's their way of connecting with a river. Like it's not anybody's in particular's fault. But I'd seen the river go from wild and like not quite pristine, but wild, to canalised, like big concrete walls, massive concrete locks. There was no flow on the river anymore. There was all this really stinky boat traffic just buzzing up and down the river, like oily surface of the water, plastic bottles gathering around the locks because there was no movement of water. And I came off the water that night and I was in such a bad mood, and I actually cried and cried and cried to James. And I was glad I had James there with me, actually, because I did not know how to handle this. I felt so angry, and you know, I'm not an angry person, but I felt this real anger towards this kind of lack of consideration for how flipping beautiful that river is and how wild it is. And that's because I'd spent 3 days paddling on the wild section, and for 90% of the general public, they haven't spent 3 days paddling that wild section. So how on earth can we expect them to feel this like passion towards keeping it wild? We just can't.
Well, I think, Cal, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's one thing that really resonates there with me that I read in your on your blog about your trip was you mentioned that you think that we need a mass reconnection to our natural world and what it means to be part of it in order for individuals, these are your words I'm quoting here, to be expected to care about them, and immersing ourselves in those kind of situations, like your 3 days of amazing environment with the kingfishers and stuff. So how do you think how do you think we're going to get that message across? Do you think it starts with the youth, and let's get the school kids out of the classroom again like they used to when I was at school? I mean, as you know, I spent the winters in New Zealand, and out there, the children are taken out of the classroom as much as possible, and they have this whole different understanding and respect of their natural environment. And so this what resonated with me, what you're talking about now. In order for people to make a change, they've got to immerse themselves, haven't they, in it? And how do we do that?
Absolutely, 100%. And yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the kids either. Like,
yeah,
I'm 32. I'm an ocean lover through and through, and yet for me, like even for me, this is what I keep wanting to come back to. Like even for me, I had no idea how much that river was going to affect me, and I think, you know, our society is struggling with mental health problems, and I think a lot of that is, you know, this is not to belittle certain mental illnesses which are not caused by not spending enough time in nature, but you know, I think there is a lot to be said for finding our connection in our world, finding our connection to our natural world, finding our place in our natural world. And if we can appreciate the mental health benefits of that, if we can appreciate what it means to us personally, then that's what's going to make us want to protect it. It's so important. I think for kids, yes, definitely. And as soon as you get them there, they get it. 1 in 5 kids in the UK has never been to the sea. It's crazy that we live on an island and 1 in 20% of kids has never been to the sea. And you know, even in our backyards, like we're never far from a body of water or a forest or, you know, some area of nature that we can connect to and feel a connection to. And I feel really, really passionately about this. And it's actually, I'm in the middle of setting up a charity specifically to do this.
So excellent. Has it got a name yet? It has, details, or is it all hush hush at the minute?
I'll tell you in a second, because this has been such a long journey. But I really feel that, you know, like we've got this massive kind of a growing group of people who get it. We've got paddleboarders, kayakers, wild swimmers, surfers who get that immersion in nature and how powerful that is and how much that makes them want to protect it. And then we've got this massive section of society who, perhaps haven't experienced that and therefore don't feel like it's their conversation to have. And actually, I really want everybody to have the opportunity to feel that connection and to say this means something to me, and I want to protect it, and also empower people to have that opportunity to improve their well-being. And oftentimes, we're really privileged, aren't we? We can afford to buy a paddleboard and go paddling, but not everybody can, and not everybody knows what to do. And so what I really want to do, as well as me personally taking, like, this is one of the reasons why I want to do my SUP instructor course. I'm now officially a SUP instructor, which means I can personally take people out in the water.
Woo!
But also I want to create a network of people around the UK who can do this as well. And so I'd like, if there's anyone here who runs a SUP club or a wild swimming club or anything who wants to be part of this, like, please get in touch, because I want to create this network of people all around the UK with the Water Skills Academy crew, with everybody who gets it and wants to help reconnect more people to our waterways. It's been a long old journey with the, application for charity is a lot more in depth than I ever thought it was going to be, but we're getting there. I probably shouldn't announce the name yet because it isn't all officialized, but if you keep an eye on my social media channel, we will be announcing it hopefully really soon.
Well, we look forward to that. I mean, you've got the WSA 100% behind you on that, and I'm sure amongst our audience and in the bigger paddling fraternity, people will embrace that. So how do we find out about that, and how do we find out about your other projects? That I'm sure you've got something up your sleeves. How do we find out about this stuff then, Cal?
Yeah. Just 1 second again, coming back to that question about how do I not get super depressed about it.
Yeah.
One of the main ways I stay upbeat is by spending time with other people who care about this stuff. It's like, if it's just me on my own and I'm paddling down the river and I'm really upset, I can quite quickly spiral. As soon as I get around other people who care, it's like you're amongst your tribe, you're all fighting for the same thing. It's so empowering and so exciting to be part of a community, and I think that is incredibly important for all of our mental health when we're tackling these big issues. And as soon as I finished that River Severn trip, I reached out to people that I knew who knew stuff about this, like the Save Our Rivers guys, other friends and organisations that I know campaign about this. So I think that's really important, and that always picks me up.
Yeah.
How to keep, so I'm working on quite a few things at the minute. The charity for one. There was also some really exciting research came out recently from the University of Exeter about just how beneficial for well-being nature documentaries are for people. James and I are currently working on a documentary series all about kind of reconnecting people to our ocean even when we can't get them there. So we've got loads of really exciting...
When's that coming out then? Is it going to be announced on a WSA webinar tonight?
We're waiting for the Charity Commission application to be finalised before we kind of all in one big go. But again, like, we're hoping that to go out to schools, universities, online. So if anyone watching has a platform and outlet that we can utilise for that, then please get in touch. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Instagram. That's the social media I use the most because I like pretty pictures. And it's just Cal_Major. I'm on Twitter and Facebook as well, and my website is calmajor.com, and there's all contact details on there. And like I said, we're trying to create a community, so the more people involved, the better, really. And I know, and the more people I speak to about this, the more I realise that, like, I am so far from alone in all this stuff that I feel passionately about. Like, there's so many water users who feel the same kind of power of that connection.
Yeah, brilliant. You're doing an amazing job, Cal, and the collaboration is key, isn't it? If we really want to take this as far as we can. So I think well, I mean, on behalf of WSA, Cal, if there's any more questions coming through, what you can do is, if you have any questions specifically for Cal in the future, you can direct them to Cal via her website. We're always can pass them on as well via the Water Skills Academy website. So I'd just like to say, take this opportunity on behalf of WSA and our audience. Thanks ever so much, Carol. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I can't wait to find out about the other stuff that's coming out, and we'll monitor that and look for that on your website. So have a fantastic evening. Thanks so much for giving up your Sunday evening and telling an amazing story once again. So have a wonderful rest of the Sunday evening, and take care and carry on doing all that brilliant work. And thanks very much, audience. We will be running some more autumn webinars as well. We'll post those on our Facebook page. It's got some interesting stuff coming up. So good night, everyone. Thanks ever so much, Carol. Unless you've got a last word or not.
Yeah, just to thank you all as well, everybody for joining, and to thanks Chris and the WSA. And like, honestly, I've just spent a few weeks doing the SUP training in various blocks, and it's awesome, like genuinely amazing to be part of part of the WSA crew. Like it's such an authentic model, and really stoked to be part of it. So thank you all. Thanks everyone for coming along.
Okay, right. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.